Should you raid your 401k for sports cards? I'm hearing all sorts of crazy stuff out there, like, who needs a 401k? I've got sports cards. I don't trust the market, but I trust my collection. Yikes. I'm going to talk about all of this, and the answer might actually surprise you. First off, there are two massive benefits to a 401k. Number one, it's tax deferred. So your tax rate now, it could be 30%, it could be 40%. The idea is that when it comes time to take money out of that 401k, you're retired, you don't have much of an income, and your tax rate is 10 or 15 or even 20%. That is easy, free, long-term money. Also, the employee match. If you have an employee match at work, that's free money. If they're matching 5%, that's an immediate 5% return. If they're willing to match fully your amount, that is a 100% return. You will never get that in the stock market. You can barely get that doing a drug deal, and you need to take that immediately and make sure you at least do it up to the employee match. You might say, Nick, that all sounds great, but there's this sports card I want, man. This Wemby card, it's gonna pop, and I need the money now, and it's sitting right there in my 401k. I can click a few buttons and grab it. Well, here's the immediate cost of that decision. The first cost is 10%. The government's just going to clean you out. So if you take 10 grand out of your 401k, the government says, thank you very much. Here is 9. After that $9,000 hits your bank account, you created an income event. And so you will get taxed on that $10,000 amount, whatever your tax rate is. So if it's 30%, you're going to lose 3 grand. If it's 40%, 4 grand. That's painful. So that 10 grand you were going to use to buy that car, it's really 6, and you paid a steep price. That's just the immediate price. There's a long-term cost here as well. Now, if you buy that sports card, it's not going to give you dividends. There's no cash flow. There's no business behind it. It's only going to grow if the price someone is willing to pay for it also grows, and that's dependent on so many timing factors. So in short, this is a horrendous idea. Anybody that tells you to do this, just don't listen to them. Don't listen to any advice they ever give you again. Just move on. Maybe even don't be friends with them. However, there is a way to invest in sports cards that I do agree with, and I'll tell you about that right now. Diversification. Sports cards can actually be an interesting diversifier in a well-balanced portfolio. We actually had a financial advisor on the channel back last year, and he said that up to 2% of your overall investment portfolio could be set aside for collectibles like art, sports cards, stamps, cars, you name it, just the collectibles category. And the rationale here is that sports cards move differently than stocks and bonds because they're dealing with different factors. They may be more sensitive to inflation. They're more sensitive to a player's performance. The player's performance isn't impacted by the stock market. So while bonds might move this way and stocks might move that way, sports cards might move this way. And as the overall portfolio grows, it does well because it can weather all these different conditions. There's actually an old saying in finance that there's no such thing as a free lunch except diversification. That is a true, absolute free lunch. Anytime you diversify your portfolio, you reduce risk and you increase return. It's almost always a good thing as long as you're diversifying the right way. This approach is actually called the all-weather approach to a portfolio, which is a pretty cool idea that was invented by Ray Dalio. If you don't know who that is, he's he's probably worth $40-50 billion, the most successful hedge fund founder and investor of all time. And I guess I'll tell you the story behind him in case you're interested. So Ray Dalio, he was on Wall Street and he thought there was a better way to invest in stocks at scale. And he was a history buff. He loved reading about history and human beings kind of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So Ray Dalio had this light bulb moment where he says, you know what? Over the last 2,000 years, a lot has changed. There's been wars, there's been famine, there's been COVID-19, right? Things change. But what never changes is human behavior. Those 7 deadly sins, right? Like greed and gluttony and our poor decision making in certain circumstances. So his idea was that if human behavior never changes over a period of thousands of years, then we can pull data from events that have happened before and learn from it and invest in it. So if you had a high interest rate environment like the 80s and relatively high disposable incomes, he would go out and research, okay, well, it looks like the Mayans had this exact same environment when they were invaded by Spain. Like, he will go that far back. And he started this with just like 2 or 3 people, and they pulled together a database of every financial event that had ever happened in like the history of recorded time. And then he would take what's happening in the stock market and tie it back to that and see what you learned from it and see how to handle it. And he created this all-weather philosophy where the portfolio could withstand 17 different scenarios. Everything from a pandemic to interest rate sensitivity to the price of gold tanking to the stock market crashing. He has a portfolio that can survive all of it through commodities, real estate, bonds, collectibles, etc. So it's pretty cool. You should look it up. He actually wrote an excellent book that I'll put in the show notes about how he built this strategy and how he did his research and how he built up this fund. So in summary, if you build your portfolio the right way, it can do well in a lot of different scenarios, and there can be a place for sports cards. Just, I wouldn't go more than 2% on it. I would not raid your 401k for it, but I do think it could help flatten the fluctuations of performance of your overall investment portfolio, and that is not a bad thing. But I want to reiterate, do not raid your 401k for sports cards or honestly any shiny new thing that's going to give you a return. It's a terrible idea. I would only raid your 401k if it's an absolute emergency. We're talking medical emergency, family emergency, then fine. You know, you got to pay the tax to kind of save the day, right? Other than that, outside of that, don't touch it for sports cards. And at the end of this video, I will put the link to the full financial advisor episode, which I think you guys will enjoy. This is actually my financial advisor, and he's the one that kind of told me how much I could spend in sports cards and what I'm allowed to do and what percentage I can do. He trusts me to go a little higher than 2% because he's seen a track record of good investments. But anyway, you guys should check it out. It's a pretty good one. And thanks again. Hopefully you guys subscribe because I am dropping random stuff like this all the time. Random days, random times. The only way you're going to get this is if you hit that bell. Otherwise, it's probably going to get buried in all the other videos. So thanks again for the support, and talk soon.